Hello, I'm Mary Homestone, your co-instructor for the Heart Mountain Field Course. I'm looking forward to meeting you in Cody on July 20th. Meanwhile, here's a little introduction from my home office in Fort Collins, Colorado. I grew up on the East Coast and moved to Wyoming in the mid-1970s, attracted both by the spectacular landscapes and the opportunities for women to work in non-traditional jobs such as construction. This was a boom time in Wyoming, and like most boom times in our history, the Equality State put women to work wherever they were needed. After working at coal mines and power plants and on a seismograph crew, I settled into carpentry and spent several years building and remodeling houses. This work eventually led me to an interest in older buildings and the stories that they can reveal. Combining my interest in history with my love for architecture eventually led me to a career in historic preservation. I guess maybe I've always been a historic preservationist, but I didn't realize it until I attended my first historic preservation conference at the Buffalo Bill Center in Cody in 1982. I had recently been accepted into the graduate program in historic preservation at the University of Vermont and was excited about getting into the field. Studies at UVM included architectural history, preservation law, development economics, and building conservation, plus all kinds of practical experience in preservation methodology. For our class advocacy project, my classmates and I launched a campaign to interest Vermonters in saving their Art Deco and streamlined modern treasures of the 1930s and 40s. At the time, that was the recent past, and the old movie theaters, storefronts, and first-generation gas stations were being ignored in favor of resources considered more historic. Now, of course, the recent past is the 1950s and 60s, and preservationists around the country are waging similar campaigns to draw attention to these resources before they all disappear. I started my historic preservation career in Laramie as the executive director of the Our Town Downtown Revitalization Project, the precursor to today's Main Street program. After a year in Laramie, I took a job with the regional office of the National Trust for Historic Preservation in Denver, where I worked on historic preservation projects in Wyoming and 7 other states. While at the Trust, I helped to save the Sheridan Inn from demolition, nominated the South Pass area of Wyoming to the World Monuments Fund watch list to help protect it from development, and started the Tracks Across Wyoming Heritage Corridor. I also started a national program to save historic barns called Barn Again. After almost 15 years at the Trust, I decided it was time for a change. Besides, I was tired of commuting between Denver and Fort Collins, where my husband and I had moved in 1985. I started consulting business and applied for and received a Fulbright Fellowship to study rural preservation in Japan. My family and I spent the 2001-2002 academic year in Japan, where I traveled extensively to rural villages and farms, researching how the Japanese preserve and protect their iconic rural landmarks. When I returned from Japan, I was offered the opportunity to join the faculty of the American Studies program at UW to develop our public sector and historic preservation component. I've been teaching courses in historic preservation and the American built environment at UW since 2002. It's a great experience for me to be able to share with students what I've learned over a long professional career. In addition to teaching, in the 12 years I've been at UW, I've managed about 40 different research projects in historic preservation, most of which I've conducted with the help of students. My favorite part of teaching is leading field courses in different landscapes throughout Wyoming. As you will see when we get started with the field course, I'm passionate about cultural resources, historic buildings, older neighborhoods, traditional farm buildings, and landscapes that reflect layers of human life and activity. I find older places fascinating for the stories they tell and the memories that they spark, and I'm interested in ways that historic resources can be protected without losing the layers of history that make them interesting in the first place. While many people associate historic preservation exclusively with buildings, it really encompasses all historic and cultural resources, including whole landscapes such as Heart Mountain. My research has included the Heart Mountain area, specifically the Japanese American internment camp and the barracks from the camp that now populate the landscape at Heart Mountain. I've also conducted research on the South Pass historic landscape on the Oregon-Mormon-California Trail and numerous ranches and dude ranches in Grand Teton National Park. One reason I like taking students to the field is that it gives you a chance to use your eyes and other senses and exercise your powers of observation in order to pick up clues in the landscape that tell us about who lived and used these areas in the past. In other words, you don't always have to look for answers in books or online. There's a lot you can learn by carefully observing and listening. While research is definitely an important component of landscape study, observation is equally important. Our 10 days in the field at Heart Mountain will give you a chance to practice the skill of informed observation. Another important skill in landscape study is learning to describe what you observe. Your description will lead to questions which you can try to answer through research and interviews. I like to say that there's no such thing as a nondescript landscape or building. Everything can be described, and once you learn to see, describe, and ask questions, it opens up a whole new world. No place is boring. There's always something to explore and question. So, I look forward to meeting all of you in the weeks ahead, and I look forward to hearing your stories of the places that matter to you.